Iowa State had the best draft class in school history. Um, it might not necessarily be by a wide margin if you look at the 2021 draft. Well, the 2022 NFL draft when Will McDonald got drafted. Actually, no, that's in draft. Brock Purdy went in the seventh round. Charlie Kohler was drafted. Chase Allen was picked up in an undrafted free agent status. Breece Hall was taken. It was a big draft all the way around. After the 2021 season, so the 2022 draft, and you had so Will McDonald was the year after in the first round, but you had a number of draft picks there, and obviously Brock Purdy in the NFL has turned into if that whole thing was redrafted, Brock Purdy's probably a first round pick. If not, first or second round pick in that draft. I'd have to go back and check the class and just see who's all panned out. But I mean, Brock Purdy, turning into an obvious starting NFL quarterback, and so on his best day when the 49ers are healthy, you could make a very good argument that he's maybe a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So you have that. Charlie Kohler has started to carve himself out a nice role on the Ravens, and I would expect his role will continue to expand as Mark Andrews gets a little bit older and maybe doesn't re-sign with the Ravens. And then you've got Breece Hall is Breece Hall, who's been one of the best running back when he's been healthy. Obviously he got hurt during his rookie season, in which he was probably on pace to be rookie of the year, but he gets hurt in that rookie season, but has otherwise been healthy and very productive on bad Jets teams with bad offensive lines. So it'd be nice if Breece Hall can be relieved from the scourge that is the New York Jets, but he has still been very good. And when he's at his best and when he's got a team around him that is competent, he is one of the 5 best running backs in the NFL. So you have that draft, but I want to tell you why this draft was the best in Iowa State history. You have 2 receivers that go in. Jaden Higgins is one of the first picks of the second round, and then Jalen Noel goes in the third round to the same team, to the Houston Texans. And then you've got Darian Porter in the third round, and then you've got Jalen Travis in the fourth round. So you've got day 2 picks, you got multiple 3 day 2 picks, and then you've got another day 3 pick. And then I believe we're at 5 undrafted free agents have signed. There might be a 6th if I missed, but I know for sure we have 5. Just a remarkable thing to really establish Iowa State, who's had draft picks and all in the last 5 years, I believe, and has started to put not just a player on a roster in the NFL, like if you remember back the days when he had like a Tuba Rubin was on the Cleveland Browns, and you're like, oh my gosh, he got a couple special team snaps, or you had can't even remember. Alvin Bowen got a few snaps for Alvin Bowen got a few snaps for the Bills back in the day. Then obviously AJ Klein had a very nice NFL career. For a long time, AJ Klein was Iowa State's guy in the NFL, and Leonard Johnson had some time in, but that was even like during the Paul Rhodes era. If you go back to like the McCarney era, they just didn't put people in the NFL. They just didn't. Obviously they didn't have first round picks for a long time until Will McDonald, but they just didn't have players in the NFL that mattered for a long, long time. Now you've got a host of good. You've got Brock Purdy, you've got David Montgomery, you've got Breece Hall, you've got Will McDonald, you got TJ Tampa on the Ravens, who's I think is expected to take a pretty big jump going into the next few seasons here. I think he's expected to take a pretty big jump. And now you've got a couple more receivers. You got an offensive lineman. You've got another corner in the NFL. I would say it's starting to get a significant name recognition in the NFL, and it's now a program that scouts and organizations really, really respect now. Just knowing the kind of players that Matt Campbell has been putting into the NFL. John Lynch had some glowing words about the Iowa State football program last week. We've heard good comments from the Texans GM. Obviously, big fan of Iowa State players, as we'll get into here in just a little bit. And the Jets have talked about Iowa State guys. Iowa State now is a program that they're developing a reputation and have developed finally a reputation where scouts will make a point to go to Iowa State's pro days and things like that. Now they have Big 12 pro day, so there's not really a pro day there, but they make sure to put scouts in the stands during regular season games and things like that, and keep an eye on Iowa State football players because the program has such a good reputation in the league now that they you really have no choice but to pay attention and see who's coming up, especially because you look at who's on um, and who's coming up right now. Who could be kind of next up. I would say the next big name, big name that comes out for Iowa State is probably not next year, but the year after when you have Rocco Becht coming out next year. And I mean, technically Rocco is eligible for the draft after this season. I think just based on him not having like prototype size, I think he would be a long, like if he left after his redshirt junior year, I mean, I don't think he would anyways, but even if he did, he would have to have a pretty remarkable 2025 season, I think, to be in contention to be a day 2 pick or something like that. I think his size just doesn't help him at all. Um, and for better or worse, the NFL, for all their faults in quarterback talent evaluation, or it really, honestly, talent evaluation across the board, but especially at the quarterback position where it's just so hit or miss, and they're kind of guessing a lot. The size thing is going to hurt him just the same way it did Brock Purdy. Now, that said, Brock Purdy being as good as he has been in the NFL is excellent news for Rocco Becht because it's same body type, a little bit undersized, decent but not amazing arm, accurate, kind of a gamer. You could argue maybe Rocco's better in the clutch than Brock Purdy was in college. You could also argue that Rocco's got better fundamentals right now as far as not throwing off his back foot and things like that. Now, Brock doesn't really do that much anymore now that he's been in the NFL and has professional quarterback coaches and all this, right? And not taking a dig at any Iowa State quarterback coaches, but you could see there's a marked improvement from Brock in college versus Brock being able to focus on football as a full-time job, and it is his job to be good at football. Now, you can see a marked improvement, and that can only help Rocco. The longer Brock stays good, that can only help Rocco Becht going forward as far as his draft stock goes. That said, for him to be a real factor in next year's draft, I think he would have to explode this year. Like I'm talking like be a dark horse Heisman candidate type. Iowa State's a Big 12. Yeah, Iowa State's in the Big 12 championship game again. Maybe in the playoff, whatever it is. I think Rocco would have to have a pretty incredible season to be in like a factor to be drafted next year. Because he'd have to be good enough to have a good enough draft grade to convince him to leave early, which I don't know that he would. So it's a pretty big leap. But I did see there was a too early 2026 draft that had Rocco as the 18th overall pick in the first round of next year's draft, which I said, there, I think a lot of mountains would have to move for that to become a reality. But if that did become a reality where Rocco has suddenly played himself into first round pick conversation for next year's draft, Iowa State has had an incredible football season. Like I'm talking Big 12 champion in the playoff, that kind of thing. Rocco's maybe a fringe Heisman contender or even an actual Heisman contender. Many things have gone extremely well for Iowa State if that is somehow the case. So I hope he plays into that conversation, but right now I wouldn't lean on it. But otherwise, as far as kind of future NFL picks, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily one on the roster that immediately right now projects as a high pick in next year's draft. There are a couple guys on the roster that I think with big seasons could be there or could play themselves into that. The first name that, that comes to my head would be like Chase Soule, who's got at the receiver. He's got the size that if he is as good as we think he can be, Chase Soule is absolutely a type of body that the NFL likes to draft. Jaden Higgins went early because he can do a lot of things well. I think if Chase Soule can follow the same development curve that Jaden Higgins did, you're obviously in a recipe there for a good pick. Xavier Townsend, it has the athleticism there. I say it'll have to really get the ball in his hands quite a bit and really take advantage of that to see him rise a ton, I think, just because his size will hold him back. On the defensive side of the ball, Dominique Orange is probably if I was, it's going to have a day 2 or better pick next year, it's probably going to have to come from Dominique Orange. I just think his explosiveness on the defensive line. He's continued to slim down a little bit. Um, I realize I've kind of skipped the thing to future NFL prospects, but I'm on the train now, so we're gonna keep going. Um, Dominic Orange is your best hope. His explosiveness, his size. I think NFL scouts will love him going into the draft process next year if he decides to leave. And if like a lot of this can change too with the house settlement, and if they have a fifth year of eligibility where he could come back again if he really wanted to, or whatever. I think Dominic Orange's draft grade will be good enough that he'll probably leave after this coming season. We'll see. The linebackers right now are probably too young. Caleb Bacon, I don't know if I think he might be too much of a late bloomer, but he could be a day 3 pick. I think if he can stay healthy and put together a really good season this year, I think Caleb Bacon could be an interesting day 3 pick as a stand-up edge rusher. Jeremiah Cooper is interesting. I think he's got to really have a nice season this year. He's go back to his Big 12 all defensive team form of his sophomore season, pick off some passes, but even then his size is going to hold him back just a little bit. Jontez Williams, maybe size is still going to be an issue there, but obviously shows all the ball skills you need. Yeah, some interesting names, but it's guys that are going to have to rise up and put themselves in that category right now. For next year, it's probably going to be Dominique Orange, and then we'll see. But it'll be interesting going forward.